keep people very late. Okay, we'll stand for prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, everywhere present and filling all things, treasure of blessings and giver of life, come and dwell within us, cleanse us of all stain, and save our souls, O gracious one. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, glory to Jesus Christ. All set? Okay. All right. So, well, I don't know about you guys, but I've been waiting for this day since we started. This is it. This is the beautiful part about Daniel, and it's like his previous chapters, all his previous chapters, in a way, you know, these interpretations that he did and the visions, the previous visions he had, they kind of lead up to this. They kind of give you hints along the way of what the real message is, which is coming in these chapters here. We have chapters 10 through 12 are all one vision. So we're going to try to go through all three of them to get through those. Yeah. Made for Epiphany. Chapter 10. So we're going to be looking at chapters 10, 11, and 12. And these three chapters make up one vision. So that's why I want to try to do them all today. I think we can do it. There's a lot of information here now. There's going to be things I'm not going to talk about because he goes into some details about certain things, about some of the battle and the fighting and things like that. But that you can read on your own. And again, if you have any questions, you can always call me and text me. You know, we can talk about it. Okay. We'll wait for Diane to come back. Sorry?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got sidetracked for a moment here.
We still have to have a shot here.
Is that why you like that coffee so much? It comes with extras? Oh. No, that's okay. It wasn't worth it. That's Father's stash. He catches you back there. I probably shouldn't say that. We're live now. Anyways, okay, so like I said, chapter 10 through 12 is one vision. We're going to try to do them all. And again, this is like almost like the culmination of everything that we've talked about up till now for Daniel. So chapter 10 has to do with Daniel gets a visit from an angel. Now the setting is of Daniel's service in the court of Cyrus. Cyrus is what nation? Persian. Now Daniel is, yeah. Well, hold on. Wait. Leon had a question. Yeah.
Did Daniel get re-employed in the Persian court then?
Re-employed? No, I think it was a continuous thing. The stories go back and forth. In fact, in these chapters, we'll start talking about things that have already happened that Daniel's going to write about as if they're going to happen. But you have to remember that when he writes it, the people haven't seen it yet. So to them, it'll look like the prophecy had come true. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, Steve?
I get them all mixed up. I know Syria and Persia, but they weren't together around that, were they?
No, I don't think so. I think Syria with Antiochus and all that came later. Persia was defeated by the Greeks. So they had,
Remember them, one of them is like an elephant, the other one's like a donkey, so we can split them up. I'm trying to be funny, I'm not succeeding.
Well, I'm too dense to even get the joke, so.
okay. So anyway, so then it's a continuous thing. So first it was Babylon that he was in service. And then Persia came later, after Persia conquered Babylon. So that's when he became in the service of there, if you talk about the historical flow of things. But the way Daniel writes, he goes back and forth in these things. And so he's in the setting of, and this is really going to mess you up too. Even though he's in the court of Cyrus, he uses his Babylonian name, Belteshazzar. And the reason why he does that is that he wants to connect what's happening in these chapters to when he was in the Babylonia. In other words, he's trying to show that all this goes together. All this is all part of God's plan. All this comes as one thing, so to speak, as far as the message goes. Not historical, but as far as God's message goes. And so Daniel, in order to receive this, he does what? He goes into a stage of repentance, because that's the normal way to prepare for a vision.
Okay, so that's where it says at the beginning was in 3 days of mourning or something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, he's in repentance.
3 weeks, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, when he received the vision, he sees that there's going to be a conflict that happens, that this is coming. And again, the elements of this dream are more of when Daniel was in the Babylonian court, even though he's in Cyrus's court. And that's why he's using his name of Belteshazzar to show you that he's really, this is all connected with Babylon right now. And this also connects this conflict to these earlier stories, and it brings it forward. So if these earlier stories weren't just battles and stories from the past and now we can forget about it, this is all connected. And it's complicated to understand and complicated to see the connection, but that's the idea here. And so this conflict that he's going to see, and what's going to happen is what? Anybody know what the conflict is actually going to be about? Yeah, Leon.
It was the North and South fighting over something.
Okay, but a conflict I'm looking at is something bigger than that. Way bigger than that. Like maybe towards the end. Apocalyptic is what I'm looking at. But this conflict is eventually going to be about the apocalypse, about the end times. Okay? That's what this conflict is leading up to, is the end times. Okay? So now, the vision starts with a man clothed in linen, and it's by a river. And in those days, in the literature, this would actually indicate that there's some kind of angelic messenger involved here, that this man is some kind of angel bringing a message. And he's clothed in linen. And the description that Daniel gives of this man, this angel, this messenger, is reminiscent of Ezekiel. So you reckon?
Vision by the river.
Yeah, and also because of the flaming torches and the clothing in the linen, bronze and beryl. These are all signs of the presence of divine glory, which is what was also written in Ezekiel. Ezekiel had much more detail, I think. But nonetheless, this is still talking about an angelic messenger. And this messenger, this man in linen that comes to Daniel is probably Gabriel, because that's who was identified, remember back in the earlier chapters? Doesn't really say, I don't think, but that's probably what it is. That's the way they look at it, is Gabriel, because he was present before.
So angel Gabriel was the signification of Babylonia?
No, Gabriel is just a messenger for God. He's an angel. It's Gabriel, like Gabriel with the Annunciation.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I realize that, but
It's the same Gabriel.
I read that they were saying that, like you said, Michael is the figurehead or some of
Of Israel. Yeah, well, there's probably not going to be an angel that's going to be of the Babylonians.
Well, I think so, but I mean,
Yeah,
when
no.
you read it,
Yeah, no, he's just a messenger at this point. Okay? And now, this vision is also unique in the fact that the people that were present when he got the vision feel it too. They realize it. They feel. They didn't see Gabriel. They didn't hear the message. They didn't hear him talking, but they felt it. He goes into a description about the ground and the trembling, and so the people felt this. So that gives Daniel even more credibility, because the people actually experienced something in regards to that, as opposed to him being off in the woods, getting a message, and then come telling the people. You know, the people weren't around them. So this gives Daniel a little bit more credibility because the people actually feel this. Now, it said that they were afraid and they ran off. So if you're afraid to run off from something and you get far enough away where you think you're safe, what do you normally do?
Turn around.
They turn around and look back. So there's probably some people that did turn around and look and see what was going on. So, and that would even give it even more credence to Daniel's prophecy. Okay. And this also makes it more believable than his previous prophecies. Okay, the people weren't around for those, but they were for this. And that's because this is the culmination. This is the big one. This is the big vision. This is the message that I think God's trying to get across. Now, when you read it, you may see something a little bit different. So, I mean, that's how I feel about it. But, you know, that's you know, it looks like things were leading up to this in his previous visions and interpretation. And then we're given, and we read a description of Daniel's appearance before the angel, which actually drains his energy. And that, you know, you might think that, well, why would it do that? I'd be so excited about it. But the appearance of an angel is just so awesome, just so magnificent that you'd be in awe and maybe even frightened at first. And so I think that's why God sends him as a man, so that it's easier to talk. Because after all, there's a message that has to be conveyed here. It's not just, you know, show and tell. It's like, well, it is show and tell. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not just about seeing the angel, it's about talking. And so, and Daniel has to turn around and talk to the people. So he has to get this message and understand it. So, but let's see, if we look at chapter 10, verse 8 and 9. So I was left alone to see this great vision. My strength left me, and my complexion grew deathly pale, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and when I heard the sounds of his words, I fell into a trance and face to the ground. So that shows you how in awe he was about everything that was going on, about what he saw. And then we read about a heavenly battle that's coming. This battle is between Gabriel and the prince of Persia. And again, the prince of Persia could be that god with a small g, that is the god, the pagan god of Persia. And so usually when there's a battle between heavenly bodies, like between Gabriel and the god for Persia, you know, that's like a heavenly thing. But it's also significant in the fact that it also can be representative of a battle on earth. And so there's that equivalency where things can go back and forth. A battle on earth can be also representative of a battle in heaven. So these gods that represent certain nations come to fight. And again, this is a motif in the ancient times of how these battles took place. And here it starts with the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Okay, so that's why we have this back and forth thing. That's why, you know, we're in the court of Persia, but he was talking about Babylonian. But that was to make that connection. And now he's kind of brought you into where he's at. And so this Persia fight is going to be with Israel, and the Jews being monotheistic translates to an angel to fight for them. In other words, somebody to do the battle. And right now we're talking about Gabriel. Okay. And then he goes on, Daniel tells us that the prince of Persia wages war against Gabriel for 21 days. So they go to battle for 21 days.
So
Now,
rather than really about Gabriel, we're saying someone who, some group, let's say, some earthly group that represents the one true God,
yeah, Israel.
Israel.
Right. Now, because this battle is going on between the god of Persia and Gabriel, doesn't mean that's actually going on right now
Right.
on the ground. Okay. So, but then this battle between the prince of Persia and Gabriel goes for 21 days. Now, Gabriel is what kind of angel? Gabriel? No.
Huh?
Gabriel? No.
Gabriel's not archangel?
He's a messenger angel.
Oh,
Okay. Which,
okay, all right.
yeah. So, which means that he wasn't really supposed to be doing the battle. He's holding his own, and he's doing okay, but what's going to happen here? What does Daniel talk about? What does he tell us? That somebody else is going to come along to help him. And who's that? Who is the archangel? Michael. Michael the archangel is going to come. He is the one that is the leader of the host of armies, the host of angels. He is the one that is going to be doing battle. He's also the one that we look to as far as the apocalypse, that he will be involved in the battle at the end. And so that kind of gives you a hint that, and because Michael's coming in and getting involved. And that is so that Gabriel doesn't have to try to do this by himself, because he's not that kind of an angel. Okay? So the angels all had certain jobs that they would do. Gabriel was the messenger. Michael the archangel was the one that will lead the army, God's army. And so Michael will do battle, and he will battle with evil. Okay, Daniel talks about the evil that's present here, in Persia, in Babylon, with the Medes, in Greece. So, while Michael comes now and takes over the battle, Gabriel leaves to do battle with, Gabriel leaves to deliver the message to Daniel about the end of days. Does that sound familiar, the end of days? Meaning what? Yeah,
End times.
the end times. So that's what this is leading up to. That's why this is so exciting to me, because this is talking about the end times, the apocalypse. Okay? The final battle, the final judgment, the eternal kingdom. And also, being touched by an angel. When an angel comes and appears to somebody, if the angel touches them, that gives them a reassurance that this is a true vision. In other words, it's not something that they're dreaming about wrongly or anything like that. And initially, Daniel was touched by a hand. Then he was touched on the lips. Now, what does the touching of the lips remind you of anybody? Another prophet? Isaiah? Where the coal was placed on his tongue? Yeah. And usually some kind of fire is like a purification. So we could look at this as he's being purified to pronounce the word of God. Daniel becomes very weak again, and then he's touched again by a hand. So he's touched 3 times by the angel. And that is to help him, to give him strength so that he can do the job. Because, like I said, when you get approached by an angel, it's going to rock your world. You could actually be afraid. So. And these messages that are coming to Daniel now are first about battles with the Persians, and then later with the Greeks. Okay. Now, this is consistent with the prophecies earlier about the statue in chapter 2, which was talking about the Persians and the Greeks, and then the tree in chapter 4, which was mainly about Babylon. So, and if you remember, there was always this talk of 3 or 4 nations that are going to, are going to come and they're going to go. Remember, Daniel said they're going to come and then they're going to go, and mainly because they came when God favored them for them to do the work that God wanted to do. But then, when they started to go astray, then God had to do something to help usher them out.
The statue, the different parts of the statue.
Right, the bronze, the metal, and the clay at the bottom of the feet, things like that. So, that again, that also connects to the previous chapters of Daniel, to connect it all, to show that it's all connected, and to show that the prophecies that he made in those earlier chapters about these nations falling is now coming true here. Okay?
Some darn good writing in this book.
Yeah, really. Pretty cool. That's why I like the Old Testament, because you can see God's salvation plan going from the beginning and continuing on, and just going through the whole Old Testament until Jesus gets here. And you can see God's plan in it. Various stages and various things that he's trying to convey to us. Now, then Daniel gives a reference to a book. In this case, it's different from the book that was mentioned earlier, because the book was the book of the living, which has to do with what? In the earlier chapters, what did that book have? The book of the living. It had to do with our deeds, for judgment. The book of the living that was mentioned in earlier chapters of Daniel. Now, the book here is about the future. It's about what's coming. It's not about the deeds that we did, good or bad, but it's going to be about what's coming in the future. And basically, it contains God's plan for the future, but only He knows what's in that book. He's the only one that knows the plan, and He's the only one that knows when it's going to come to fruition. He's the only one that can do that. Okay? Nobody knows but God, and that's even what Jesus told us. And that takes us basically to the end of chapter 10. Now, as a side note, I want to look at verse 12. Chapter 10, verse 12. I'll go ahead and read this. No, I got it. He said to me, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words." Okay? Now, what's interesting to me is that, to me, this is like another message, a little bit different message. He talks about understanding God. He talks about humbling himself. The angel talks about, how he humbled himself before God. And because of those two things, the understanding and the humility, he was heard by God, and God sent the angels. Now, one thing, this is not part of Daniel. This is just from me. So, anything wrong about this, you got to shoot me, okay? Even if I'm the messenger, you got to shoot me. This is all my doing. There's, in the contemplatives, the ones that work on meditation. So, like for example, some of our early teachers that did meditation and wrote about it and educated others, such as Ignatius of Loyola, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Alphonsus Liguori. They talk about this kind of thing. They talk about understanding God. And this understanding has to do with the will. So the understanding, the mind, the will. Then they talk about the humility, which has to do with the heart. And basically, you can connect, and this whole idea about meditation is about connecting to God, about talking to God, and hopefully Him talking to you. And like we see, if you go through the understanding, you go through the humility, God's going to hear you and talk to you. He sent the angels to talk for Him. Same thing for us. This is like a message to us too about how to pray, if we want to pray that way. It's, this is something that each individual decides. And this prayer has to do with understanding God, because you can't really open your heart to something you don't understand. It's very difficult for us to do that. So that's the first thing. So the understanding that comes through our mind about God leads to our heart opening up, and then we humble before Him to talk to Him. And so this is like steps or procedure or things that have been done that are promoted by these contemplatives about how to meditate and to talk to God. And it was interesting to me that I saw these words in here. It just, boom, it just stuck out to me, because of the things I've read before. But so that was like a message within the message in the bottle. Question?
I read articles that sort of put a negative call over meditation, saying that we shouldn't practice meditation. It's not good, it can lead you astray. But what you're saying makes sense, but it seems to be in opposition to that. That you should meditate to get to know God.
Well, the meditation is a means of talking to God. Prayer is talking to God. So the idea is trying to talk to Him. And this talking comes through through being still, being quiet at times. But you can also use religious books or icons or whatever to help you, to stimulate your mind, to get you going, to talk. So it depends on what the source was for these articles, but you know,
They were Catholic, the Catholic source, I don't remember, can't quote, I don't remember who it was.
well, there's things that you know, like a Ouija board is a type of connection. It's not meditation, but it's a type of connection, which is bad. That can conjure up the devil, so you're not supposed to do the Ouija board. When you were talking, it reminded me of something else. Well, any of the wicked stuff, you know, I mean, you know, not wicked, you
I
know.
think they were referring more to the Eastern religions who, you know. have-
Well, if you, yoga, that's what I was gonna think about, yoga. Yoga is one that involves meditation. Now, there's different people that say different things about yoga, that if you don't go and do the meditation part of yoga, just doing it for the exercise, then they say that's okay, I don't know, that's what I've heard. But if you're doing the meditation part, that's wrong, because that could lead you astray. And like you said, there are other Eastern religions that practice that. I think Zoroaster is another one that might, I'd have to look, but anyways, yeah, you gotta be careful what you're praying for, I mean, but, you know, to involve these other things, like yoga or some other Eastern religion, or we, you know, any of those, then yeah. But if you talk about meditation, like in the way that's directed by St. Alphonsus Liguori, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Ignatius in a way, he looks more about a consolation and desolation, which is a little bit different approach, but it's still trying to connect with God. So, you know, if you look at these, you know, if you look at the ones that have been established, you know, years ago, centuries ago, then you should be okay. So, and if you have any doubts or questions, talk to a priest. You know, that'd be the best thing, you know, especially when you're just starting out, especially if you're doing something different that's you don't see in the literature as common, and you want to look at it, then talk to a priest about it.
Would you say that, like, good meditation would be, like sitting in front of you're sitting in church and just meditating, you know, on God and the tabernacle?
You can do that. When you pursue meditation like the contemplatives do, you're talking about doing something on a regular basis. You're talking about someplace quiet, someplace you're alone, someplace that nobody's going to disturb you, and you do this for a period of time. It can range anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. And you do this on a regular, every day, and you go through certain procedures or steps when you're a beginner to learn how to do this. So some of these contemplatives, that once they really knew what they were doing, they can just sit down and start talking to God. You know, I'm far away from that. But, you know, that's how some of them, from what I read, that's how they, like St. Teresa, I think, is one that can do that. And I know there's a lot of St. Teresa and St. Alphonsus. I think St. Teresa communicated with, I think they were contemporaries, either that or she read his work, and there seems to be agreement between the two of them on certain things, plus others. You know, those are just the ones I'm aware of. You know, I'm very new at this. But I just wanted to point out that the reading the Bible is so cool. You don't know what you're going to get. You know, and all of a sudden, like when I saw that, you know, it's like, first time I saw that, it's like, wow, that was very familiar to me. You know, that message, and you know, here God has put that in there, you know, that angel has told him this. You know, which is, you know, the Bible's for all of us. So that's a message to us too, as well, as far as, you know, praying and seeking God. Anyway, that was the side issue. Now we're going to go back to chapter 11 now. Future events revealed. But before we go to future events, stay tuned for this commercial. No, Daniel presents events from the past and the present, but writes about them as if they're in the future. In other words, it's been experienced. He writes in like in the future tense, so that when the people get these books, they'll read that, and then when they look at what had happened, it's like, wow, they came true. So these prophecies came true. And
Doesn't sound like dirt.
yeah, it sounds like a little bit of cheating there or something. Yeah, it's a little different. And this was done in order to gain some credibility, even though it may be just the opposite if you knew what he was doing. They didn't know, the people didn't know what he was doing. So, at least I don't think so. So this is to give him more credibility for what's coming in these chapters. Okay, not so much what has happened already. And this is actually, they actually have a phrase for this among commentators, I guess. It's a prophecy after the event. It's pretty self-descriptive. In today's world, we say looking back is always 2020. So, same thing there. But he did this to show and emphasize to the people of Israel that God's plan has been consistent and that the past events prophesied have come true. And because a lot of these things that have come true were prophesied by other prophets. Like I think it's Jeremiah that talked about Babylon, if I remember right. I have to go back and look. What other prophets that talked about the 70 years, which is what Daniel has experienced? That might have been Isaiah. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. I'm getting all my memories not as good as they used to be. So, but anyways, so he's not the only one that prophesies about these events. But at this point, it gives Daniel credibility for the future events, which he will talk about before they occur. So this is actually something that's in the future now. And like I said, these may be more important than what the past was. So he talks about certain past things, and then he gets, and then from, for the past events, it covers verses 2 to 20, chapter 11, 2 to 20. And here he mentions, these are past events, he mentions the succession of kings in Persia who go against the Greeks. Okay? But soon Alexander the Great, who's referenced as the warrior king in verse 3, that's Alexander the Great, comes to power and defeats the Persians. Okay? So the present time is pretty much with Cyrus, with the Persians, but Daniel had talked about what had happened in the past, with the Babylonians and the Medes. So Alexander defeats the Persians. He goes into great detail, and he does this. He goes into great detail about the kings who come to power next, which are the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria. So the Ptolemies are known as the south, or the kings of the south, and Seleucid Antiochus of Syria are kings of the north. And both of these powers were schooled in the Greek way. Okay, by this time they've been schooled in the Greek way, which means what as far as their religion? Pagan. So they're promoting paganism. Hellenization was about paganism. Okay. And Antiochus IV, he's a great promoter of Hellenization. Okay, so the kings of the south and north, they go at each other. They battle each other with victory going back and forth. Okay, it's kind of like a soap opera. Some of the stuff that Daniel talks about. There's intrigue of murder. There's poisonings. There's treasure taken by one side or the other side. There's arranged marriages. There's all kind of sort of stuff going on with these battles between the north and the south. What's that?
They should make a movie about the Bible.
I think they probably do. Cecil B. DeMille, you can check out one of those. and of course, there's numerous complicated plots to gain power. And spies were involved. One side would send spies to the other, and one back to the other, and vice versa. And this fighting went on back and forth to about 198 BC. And this is when the Seleucids defeated the Egyptians and gained control of Judea. All this sets the stage for the present prophecies. Okay, so again, we were talking about the past here, verses 2 to 20. And this sets the stage for the present prophecies relating to the battles between Ptolemy and Antiochus, which is now presented in verses 21 to 39. It's talking about the present. Now, Seleucus IV replaced Antiochus III, actually, in real life, who died while trying to rob the temple of Bel for tribute. So the temple of Bel, Bel is what? A pagan god. Okay, it's one of their pagan gods. Not necessarily saint, but pagan god. And what is the tribute about? What's going on here? Rome is starting to raise its head. So now Rome has conquered a lot of land. So a lot of these nations have to pay tribute to Rome for various reasons, either for them to stay out of the country or because they've been conquered and whatever. So Antiochus III tries to rob the temple, tries to rob his own god so he can pay the tribute. And he sends officials to do this because these tributes are mounting and they can't keep up with the tax that they have to pay. So then we come to Antiochus IV. And he is the contemptible person in verse 21. He takes the throne of Syria when Seleucus, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, IV, was assassinated. So Antiochus took over here. So who assassinated Seleucus? Who do you think did? Who took over?
Who assassinated who?
Okay, Antiochus IV takes over from Seleucus the fourth, I believe, and because he was assassinated, Seleucus was assassinated. So Antiochus IV, he's the main Antiochus that we're concerned about. So he took over because Seleucus IV was assassinated. Who do you think assassinated him? Remember the horns? Remember we had 3 horns that, out of the 3 horns came one small one and broke up the other 3 horns? Okay, that was symbolic of Antiochus killing all his predecessors so that he can eventually take the throne. And so this was the last one that he killed, according to the Bible, to take the throne. Now the Prince of the Covenant, which is the high priest, and in this case, Onias III, he dies, he's replaced by his brother Jason. So, but Onias III was killed. And who do you think did that? There's a theme here. Antiochus IV. He did that too. And the reason was because Onias was not a supporter of Hellenization, but his brother was, Jason. So, in other words, if you can't win their hearts, you kill them. So, and another thing that Antiochus would do would spend money, throw money at people to get them to come to his side, to fall into the Hellenization. So, so like I said, he shares his spoils with the Jews that are in favor of Hellenization. And this is quite a devious plot, to play with. And it's taken to a higher level when Antiochus thwarts the spies of Ptolemy and wages war against Egypt, which is the South Kingdom. So he found out about the spies that Ptolemy has sent. So he takes care of them. And even though Egypt was the stronger force, Antiochus won. He went to battle with the South. Antiochus won. And now Daniel writes about the evil present in both the kings and others. as they lied to each other at the peace table. They came together, according to Daniel, came together at a peace table to talk peace, but they were all lying to each other. So, but it's interesting that Daniel talks about the evil that's present in these people. Yes.
Which one of them was the lesser evil?
A lesser evil?
Or were they both equally bad?
It doesn't really say. I don't know which one would be worse than the other.
I'm not talking about presidential politics,
Yeah, vote for the lesser evil. No, I don't know who was lesser or greater in evil. It sounds like they were both pretty close to each other, because they just wanted to do battle and kill each other. But Antiochus eventually won over on that. So he may be the stronger evil one, maybe. But I don't know if he was more evil than the other one. It sounds like they were pretty much, for the times they were doing what they had to do to get their wins, their
so.
spoils.
All this time, were the Jews just tolerated? Were they oppressed, or?
During when now?
Yeah.
Oh, they were oppressed now. Oh yeah, Antiochus. We're going to get to the point about Antiochus and what he did. So yeah, the Jews were oppressed big time. Okay, they were abused considerably. So. So they have these peace talks. They fall apart. And Daniel talks about that peace won't come until an appointed time by God. So what is he talking about there, appointed time?
Judgment.
The end of days, final judgment, when there is no more evil. See, it's interesting, he throws in there about the evil that's present. And that this evil is present in the world. And the end times is going to take care of evil. Okay. It's going to be the final battle. This is where Satan and the devils lose to Jesus and his army. Okay. Now, Antiochus IV goes back home with many riches, because he just conquered Egypt. But still, he desires the riches of Jerusalem. He really wants to gain those riches. And or to go after the people that are resisting assimilation. Okay, remember, this is all part of conditioning, of control, about these people being assimilated. Remember how Daniel started out, that he was taken into the court so that they could assimilate him. And then once you assimilate, especially somebody that's wise like Daniel and educated, then you throw them back in with the other people and get Daniel to do their work and get rid of assimilate the other people. So all this is about assimilation, to get them to do your work. For Antiochus to get them to do his work for him. So he decides to go against the south again because there were more spies. Okay, like I said, it's kept going back and forth. But this was stopped by the Romans, and the Romans are represented by the word kittim, Kittim. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that has to do with the Romans. So he gets stopped in trying to go in and ransack Jerusalem. So he's really mad now, Antiochus. And he proceeds to take it out on Jerusalem again. So he goes back for more punishment. He goes back for more. He attacks the temple in Jerusalem. And if we look at chapter 11, see verse 31. They shall abolish, forces sent by him, by Antiochus, shall occupy and profane the temple and fortress. So he's going out to profane, he's out to desecrate it, to show disrespect, and to ransack and take whatever riches he can. They shall abolish regular burnt offering and set up the abomination that makes it desolate. So, the doing away with the burnt offering is Antiochus' way of stopping the Jewish that's code for, he's stopping all the Jewish practices and religion. He's putting the clamps on. He's trying to shut it down. And the desolate of the temple, the abomination, is when he sets up the statue of Zeus in the temple. So that's true sacrilege there. So he desecrates the temple, and he wants to shut down the Jews. And so, this is a very strong work here that's done by Antiochus, and he abuses the Jews terribly, killing them, beating them. If you don't comply, they'll kill you. So again, Antiochus has abolished Jewish law and profanes the temple by placing Zeus in the temple. As in any conflict, there are those who are loyal and those that aren't. So if we look at verse 33 in chapter 11, the wise among the people shall give understanding to many. For some days, however, they shall fall by sword and flame and suffer captivity and blunder. Okay, so you got people that are going to remain loyal even at the sword. They're going to be able to remain loyal. But there's going to be some that aren't. Some just can't take, the beatings and everything that's going on. So the wise men are those that are loyal to God. And Daniel is among the wise who will give understanding. Those who fall by the sword are probably the Maccabees, who are in favor of military force to obtain their objective. And what was their objective mainly? Or at least one of them. That was to get rid of the Romans. And that went on till when? They even went on to the, Leon. Leon.
Weren't the Maccabees trying to get rid of the Greeks, the Seleucids?
Well, the Romans were part of that. The Romans were starting to take over. So whatever they would conquer, they would fall underneath that umbrella. So it's like when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. If you conquer the Persians, because they conquered the Babylonians, then you have conquered the Babylonians. So you have like a chain effect here with this conquering. But at this time, the Maccabees are starting to work up a frenzy against the Romans. And that was what was happening when Jesus came. Remember how a lot of the Jews, they were looking for a military leader, right? We read that in the Gospels, that they were looking for the Messiah to lead them out of the oppression under the Romans. And so they wanted a military leader.
Well, wasn't the Maccabees a fairly short period of time of resistance, like 30 years or something?
No, it's a little bit longer. This is like 198, 190 when they appear. And it goes on, I think, to probably just before Jesus, because with Jesus you had another group. You had, which group that was? The Zealots. The Zealots were a fighting group that were against the Romans. Jews, these are both Jewish groups that, it doesn't really matter what you call them. They wanted the Romans out of there. And that's what they were looking for in the Messiah. They were looking for a Messiah for this world and not of the next world. And so, those that were fallen by the sword, they didn't listen to Daniel and look at Daniel as the wise one. They had other ideas about what they wanted to do. So that's how they ended up in conflict with Antiochus and the others in Rome. Now Daniel writes of the end time, which has not yet come, but it is on the way. So if we look at verse 35. So some of the wise shall fall, so that they may be refined, purified, and cleansed until the time of the end. For there still is an interval until the time appointed. Okay, so some people are going to fall, even the wise are going to fall at times. And, we're all going to have to wait until the appointed time, until the end time. Okay? Let's see. Okay. Daniel And this martyrdom, where these people die, they become actually martyrs. So they're actually purified, for the kingdom. But the kingdom isn't open yet. Okay? So Daniel goes on and describes Antiochus as evil personified. And some commentators have used this as a symbol for the Antichrist. Okay? Evil personified, the Antichrist, the one that will do battle in the end days. Because Antiochus, he pays no honor to God, speaks evil of God, has no respect for God, and all this applies even to his pagan gods. That's how inflated his head is of himself. He doesn't even care about his own gods. He goes against his own gods. He actually considers himself a god, as in big G. And he's better than all the other gods that are small g. Now, because of this manifestation that he has of himself, that's where he got the title Epiphanes. Like Epiphany, instead of a Y, it's a yes. I'm not sure how to pronounce it now. I had it at one point, I forgot.
I just missed that. I remember the word. What is that now?
Epiphanes.
Yeah, what is that?
It translates into the manifestation of God, because that's what he thought he was. He thought he was God. He was better than everybody else. He's better than the pagan God. He's better than the Israeli God. So that's how he got that title.
And he really wasn't around too long, was he?
No. We're gonna come to that. And Daniel views that the end time is coming soon, because God will not tolerate such behavior. And this is also rings familiar with the phrase that none of you will see death until, how's it go? I forgot. None of you will see death before the coming, or something like that. In other words, it makes it sound like it was just around the corner, with the apostles. They thought it was just around the corner that it was coming, and they didn't realize that, now it wasn't the time when Jesus was here. So they had to wait. So, and the same thing is here. Daniel thinks it's going to be soon, because these people have really gone against God. Now, everything is about the money, and Antiochus uses it to maintain control of everyone, as I said before, at least those that are on his side. So he leveraged those that were in favor of him with money, so that they would stay loyal to him. In other words, he bought their friendship. And Daniel continues, and I think it's verse 36 to 39, to talk about how the king will continue as is until a period of wrath, until the end time. And that's when God's plan will be accomplished. And let's see, if we look at verse 36. The king shall act as he pleases. He shall exalt himself and consider himself greater than any god, and shall speak horrendous things against the God of gods. God as in big G of gods, little g. He shall prosper until the period of wrath is completed, for what is determined shall be done. Okay. So that's talking about the end times, which of course we don't know when that's going to happen. Now we move into the future. We talk about the time of the end, the final battle, final judgment, everlasting kingdom. It's interesting how most of these verses talk about how successful Antiochus will be as the king until the south, Egypt, attacks him. Okay. However, Antiochus again will conquer everything in his path except the Moabs, the Edomites, and the Ammonites, who are enemies of Israel. This proceeds till the last verse, which simply states, "Yet he shall come to his end with no one to help him." That's it. That's all that it says. It's the end of chapter 11. Note that these events have not been confirmed by any historical source. In other words, the end times haven't come, obviously. and truly something is to happen in the future. So Daniel is probably writing at the time of Antiochus IV. Okay, remember we talked in the beginning when we started all this about how he writes at this time, but he's talking about events that happened hundreds of years before. But the main point here is that the time of the end will be known when all earthly evil, here represented by Antiochus, is eliminated. The prophecy possibly points to Antiochus' return trip back to home where he will meet his end in battle in Israel. So his death in Israel, that's the, that's like the icing on the cake. That's kind of the irony of it. He wanted it so bad that he actually ends up dying in Israel, according to what Daniel is looking at. So, that's the future. But the best is right around the corner in chapter 12. So we're going to, this is only like one page long. This won't take long. We'll finish this up. So, now Michael comes to deliver God's people, Michael the archangel. The book of life is spoken of by Daniel. This was the first book, which talks about our deeds. Okay, our deeds are in that book. Now, Daniel talks about many of those who are asleep. Many will awake to everlasting life or everlasting contempt. Let's read that chapter 12, verse 2. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. What are we talking about here? Judgment. We're talking about the whole shebang here. We're talking about the final battle. We're talking about the judgment. We're talking about everlasting life. We're talking about the resurrection. This is important. This is the first time in the Bible that resurrection of the body, or resurrection, I should say, is mentioned. So we have the resurrection here, because they're asleep, which means they're dead, right? That was the term in the Old Testament. If you're dead, you're going to rise from the dead to everlasting life, go into the kingdom's everlasting life. Everlasting contempt is going to hell. So we're talking about in the Bible here for the first time, it's about the resurrection, final judgment, and the afterlife. This is in the Jewish Bible. This is Daniel talking to the Jews. Okay. Now, what is different about this later on? When somebody else comes. Yeah. And the key point with Jesus is, if you remember in some of the epistles, they talk about Jew and non-Jew, Jew and Gentile. So you're either a Jew or everything else was Gentile. And Jesus brought to unite the two, which means everybody. So Daniel is just talking, the message from God through Daniel is to the Israelites about the resurrection. But Jesus is the one that brings it for everybody. And that's key. In fact, Jesus references Daniel. He quotes Daniel a few times while he's here on earth about the resurrection. So this is a big deal. This is what Daniel was leading up to the whole time. All these battles and all these references to the end time, and about how all these people like Antiochus is going to catch his due, and about how Antiochus is going to die because he is evil personified, the Antichrist. He's symbolic for the Antichrist. And he dies, which means that God's eventually going to win. He's going to conquer that evil personified, that Antichrist. He's going to win that battle. Many Jews were dying because of Antiochus. So this message may have come from God as compassion. But it looks like it's more than that. It looks like this is a message about the resurrection of the people. Now, what we have here is God's plan of salvation. Again, it's brought through the Old Testament. It's a continuous word about God's plan of salvation. And it's interesting that Daniel talks about resurrection and afterlife, because at that time, the Sadducees, which was a Jewish group, didn't believe in the resurrection. The Pharisees did, the Sadducees didn't. So, and this is about when the Sadducees came into play, as well as the Pharisees. And so you had these two groups that were arguing about this. But Daniel is telling them that there is going to be a resurrection. Okay. Now, it's not clear if Daniel's talking about a resurrection of the body or of the spirit. But Jesus does quote Daniel about the abomination of the desolation in the temple with Zeus. He makes reference to that, and of course of his resurrection. So he makes it clear what the resurrection is going to be. It's going to be body and soul, right? Body and spirit, because Jesus rose completely. Okay, so he clarifies that when he comes. Also, Daniel's resurrection is not like Ezekiel's, where he talks about the resurrection for Israel as a whole, as a nation. This Daniel's resurrection is about the individual resurrection. This is why there's the judgment. The judgment is on an individual basis. It has to do with your name. Your name is in the book of life, and this is what God's going to use to do that judgment, because the judgment is based on you, because you have free will. You know, the nation is not responsible for your action. You are responsible for what you do. And so it's your will whether you go with God or you go with Satan. And so these are all recorded in the book. And so Daniel is talking about an individual resurrection. Now Daniel is told to seal the book. Again, this is apocalyptic jargon to say that nobody knows about this till it happens. So we're not going to talk about it, until it happens. And this was the same thing as before when he was told this. But Daniel is anxious to know when the end time will be, so he keeps pushing. And so two men appear and talk to the man in linen. Okay, we have that man who's, that guy, that angel, Gabriel, is still there, talking to Daniel at the river. Then two other men come. And they talk about this. They try to answer his question, try to give him understanding when this will come. So the man in linen says that it will be a time. It will be 2 times and a half time. And this comes out to 3.5 years. Okay. Now, 3.5 years also corresponds to the time that Antiochus abused the Jews. That period of abuse took about it was about 3.5 years. Okay. So they're saying that it's going to be at 3.5 years, which is a short time. But, you also have to think about God's time. God doesn't have any time, okay? Or he has all the time in the world, as they say. So he's not bound by any time frame. He does it when he wants to do it, is what that means when he has no time. Daniel didn't understand again, so he asked for an explanation. And he was told that everything will remain in secret until that time. In the meantime, maintain righteousness and stay loyal to God. This is a message to all of us. Because when we talked about everlasting righteousness, remember we talked about it in the previous chapter? Everlasting righteousness. That has to do with the fact that evil is totally destroyed in this world. And so that's the only time we're going to have that, is when the end times come. And so you want to try to maintain as best you can to be righteous, to be just, and also to remain loyal to God, because he's the one that created us. He's the one that wants us to be with him. And so we want to do what we can to get there. So this message is not only for the Israelites, but it's for us as well, because the end times hasn't come here. So we want to work towards that. And again, God is the only one who knows the time. And Daniel is given 2 periods now of time after the desolation of the temple. The desolation of the temple is when Antiochus put in the Zeus, and that was towards the end of his time. So now you've got 1,290 days. This is different than the 3.5 years, because the 3.5 years has come and gone. So that's still time left to go, so to speak. And then you got 1,335 days. And this has to do with those who survive these days will be in the kingdom. Now, surviving these days is like a message to remain faithful. So this goes back to the idea of being righteous and being loyal to God. And the last words to Daniel in chapter 12 is telling him to go his way and he will be rewarded. Because up to this point he's been righteous and he's done God's work. So he's favored by God. If he maintains that, he'll have his reward. So this is the big deal. This was the chapter about the resurrection and about judgment and about everlasting life. All prophesied by Daniel. And that's why I asked Father to do that here, because we're coming on the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who brings it all together. Okay? So that's why this was the best part of all this. And I think this was really the message here, was this last chapter. And all these other things were just stories leading up to that, various things that was happening. And one of it was to obviously give Daniel credibility for these predictions, things like that. Questions?
About burnt offerings,
Mm-hmm.
they always want to get rid of them so that they, people, forget their religion and such. Well, during Jesus' time, there was still burnt offerings by the Jews, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long, and then after Jesus died, there was probably still burnt offerings.
I imagine the temple lasted till 70.
Pardon?
The second temple lasted to 70 AD. So there's probably 70 AD is when the second temple fell.
Oh, is that right? 70 AD?
70, yeah. No, with what's his name? Who played the fiddle?
Oh, yes, yes.
I think that was him.
But then, just because the temple was done, there was no burnt offerings after that.
Oh, I would imagine that there's no place to do it. You know, they would be scattered at that point, I would think. I'd have to go back and look to make sure. Yeah. So, the offerings were suspended, so to speak. Antiochus was trying to do away with it altogether forever, because that was a way of destroying the Jews. If he destroyed their faith, that would bring them down, because they were so strong in their faith. So you take away the strongest thing that they have, and they're going to crumble. At least that was his thought. So he wanted to totally do away with it, but he wasn't successful. He only lasted 3.5 years in his abuse. And the fact that he did die while he was doing this, and that we look at him, or at least some commentators look at him as the Antichrist, it shows that the Antichrist will die, because he's evil personified. He represents the Antichrist of the future, so to speak.
I guess I just, usually that forget very quickly.
No, I do too.
But when Jesus went to the temple with got rid of all the people who were selling things and stuff before the Friday, where he was at, the temple, was that the Jewish temple still standing?
Yeah, that would be outside. That's where the business was held. It's just out. It's either like inside the outer chamber or just outside the chamber, because that's where they like you would buy the doves for the offering.
Okay, but is that still the same temple as, no, they didn't build this one, we were talking about the third one.
The third one hasn't come yet.
Yeah,
There's only been 2.
so this is the second one, and it's still standing until 70, yeah.
Yeah, and the wall and the Wailing Wall, and I don't know if that's the same as the West Wall. I can't remember. But anyways, those pieces that are left standing are from the second temple, the way I understand it.
Well, I would think so, that, but I didn't, was there, the whole temple was still there in Jesus' time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you had the Pharisees, Sadducees. They're all following the law of Moses. They're all doing the sacrifices. They're all doing the kosher.
I guess I just thought that maybe there was a big church, big temple or something. It wasn't the big thing that 20 times the size of a football field that they're talking about and all that.
Well, I can't remember how big the second temple was. The third temple that we talked about, what, in Ezekiel?
That,
That was bigger. And it was modeled after the first and the second temple.
news.
Oh, good. Any other questions, comments, complaints? Cool. I'm gonna get out of here before we got complaints. No, I'm just kidding. So on March 17th, oh boy, yes. Okay, that's next week, right?
Yes.
March 17th, we are going to cover the prayer of Azariah, Susanna, and Bel and the Dragon. These are pretty short. These should be found, the prayer of Azariah, that I believe is going to be in chapter 3. If you look at it, it's at the end of chapter 3, if I remember right. And then Susanna is chapter 13, and I believe, and then, I have to look at a different Bible. And then Bel and the Dragon is chapter 14. If you have problems finding it, let me know. Give me a call. Because some Bibles, the Bibles that you guys have, that we have here, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you have a Bible that's a little different, I'm not going to go into the different Bibles and what they have and don't have. So, but if you have problems finding it, let me know. But that would conclude the class. And we should be able to finish that. Those are really short stories, so to speak. If we don't finish it, we were going to use April 7th as a makeup day. But I think you guys are pretty diligent here. We stayed 10, 15 minutes late today. So we should be able to finish that on the 17th. Okay? Does that work? Works for me. Work for you? Cool. All right. You guys have a blessed week. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Steve, I expect to see you, Dennis, I expect to see you a little bit earlier.
Oh, there's Dennis back there.
He's lurking.